Hello, friends, and welcome back to the next episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Fran is 33. Why did I say Fran like that? Fran is 33. She lives in England. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 10 years ago and with autism just a few years ago. She was a teacher, but she's not anymore. And we're going to talk all about type 1 and a number of other things, including Omnipod 5, AI for diabetes, and much more. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. drinkag1.com/juicebox. Don't forget, if you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, visit t1dexchange.org/juicebox right now and complete that survey. It will take you 10 minutes to complete the survey, and that effort alone will help to move type 1 diabetes research forward. It will cost you nothing to help. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company who's working to make the invisible visible through their Blue Balloon Challenge. Life with diabetes is like doing everything in life while trying to keep a balloon in the air. The blue balloon is a powerful metaphor for the daily struggles that those living with diabetes go through. Medtronic invites you to join the challenge by taking a video of yourself balancing a balloon while doing something in your everyday life. Post your challenge on social media with the hashtag Blue Balloon Challenge and follow at Medtronic Diabetes on Instagram to see other Blue Balloon Challenge videos. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense 365. You can experience the Eversense 365 CGM system for as low as $199 for a full year. Visit eversensecgm.com/juicebox for more details and eligibility.
Hi, I'm Fran. I live in England and I have type 1 diabetes.
Fran, how old are you?
33.
33. How long have you had type 1?
Since I was 23. So yeah, 10 years. 10 and a half.
Out of school by the time it happened?
Yeah. So I'd finished university and I was just about to start teacher training. In fact, I started teacher training 3 days after diagnosis.
Teacher training. Oh, that's interesting. So you go to university for what? And then you get out and train. How does it work becoming a teacher there?
Yeah. So you do like whatever your normal degree is usually. And then there's like a 1 year, I guess it's sort of like a degree. You do it at a university, but you have placements in schools.
Okay.
There's another way of doing it as well, but that's the one I did.
What kind of teaching were you thinking about doing at that point?
Secondary school maths.
Maths. And did you end up doing that?
I did, yeah, for 10 years, actually.
Oh, you've just recently stopped?
Yeah.
Had enough of those kids? Is that enough?
There were a lot of things about it, I guess. Behavior management was never something that I was going to love. And the pandemic was interesting because I started quite enjoying the mute button. And then I kind of realized that maybe that was a sign. So yeah, now I work at an educational technology company and we make this like online platform where you can go and learn GCSEs and A-levels, which is like school exams, basically.
I'm holding in a laugh, imagining those kids talking and you being like, and shut up.
Oh, it gets even funnier because at one point they realized that they could do that to me.
That's fantastic. It's a whole generation of kids that didn't really go to school for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've told this before, but I once opened Arden's door and she was on her bed with her laptop like positioned really strangely, and she was just bending her head forward and backwards, and I'm staring at her and I'm like, what is happening? And she kind of shoos me away, and later I say, well, what the hell was going on there? And she goes, oh, I was pretending to do sit-ups for gym class. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? So I said, A, you're doing calisthenics over Zoom, and B, you're not actually doing them. And she goes, no. And I was like, this is it. I thought the same thing you're talking about. I was like, there's no way that the teachers feel any differently about this than the kids do. Like, it's just a disaster, right?
Weird.
Yeah. You would have been better off if you gave them a treasure map and sent them out into the world and were like, here, go find fun. I guess you couldn't have done that either, but whatever. You figured out you had enough of kids when you stopped listening to them as you were teaching. That's smart to get out of that. I appreciate that. But coming out of school, a bright-eyed young girl thinking she's going to go help the youth of America. You're getting ready to start your next level of training, basically. And what happens? You get sick?
Yeah. So I actually was working at a school for a year before I started the teacher training. Mm-hmm. And near the end of that year, I started getting all the classic symptoms, tired, really thirsty, going to the loo a lot, that kind of thing. I kind of put up with that for a couple of weeks. And then I went, oh, hang on. I've heard about this on Scrubs. Yes, a TV show diagnosed me first. So then I kind of figured it out. Had a blood test. They lost the results. Had another blood test. Phoned up a week later and the receptionist was like, it says here it's 13. That's high normal. In your money, that's 230. Mm-hmm. And I went, hang on, let me Google that. None of the scales made any sense. I was like, well, 13, that's nowhere on any of these scales. That must be a different scale. And she didn't know what it meant because she was the receptionist. Yeah, that was definitely in the diabetic range, but neither of us knew that at the time. So I put up with it for another 6 weeks or so. Then I eventually went to a different doctor. He did a finger prick in the room, which obviously they should have done the first time, really. And he went, yeah, we're going to send you to the hospital today. So I said, can I have lunch first? He said, yeah, sure. And then I went to the hospital and the very nice endocrinologist gave me some insulin and things like that. And 3 days later, I had to walk up a lot of stairs in the library at the university, which not enjoy. But then a week after that, the stairs became much easier. So, insulin is good.
Was there a curmudgeonly janitor at the hospital, like Scrubs? Like, were you having like a whole thing? Nothing like that?
No, I don't think there was, unfortunately.
I can't believe. So wait, what do you remember seeing on Scrubs that made you think, I have diabetes? This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365. And just as the name says, it lasts for a full year. Imagine for a second a CGM with just one sensor placement and one warm-up period every year. Imagine a sensor that has exceptional accuracy over that year and is actually the most accurate CGM in the low range that you can get. What if I told you that this sensor had no risk of falling off or being knocked off? That may seem too good to be true, but I'm not even done telling you about it yet. The Eversense 365 has essentially no compression lows. It features incredibly gentle adhesive for its transmitter. You can take the transmitter off when you don't want to wear your CGM and put it right back on without having to waste a sensor or go through another warm-up period. The app works with iOS and Android, even Apple Watch. You can manage your diabetes instead of your CGM with the Eversense 365. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. 1 year, one CGM.
Turk gets type 2 in one of the later seasons.
Really?
Apparently that was enough to tip me off. I don't know.
No kidding. That's crazy. And not even a British show, an American show.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have a lot of good shows.
I have to tell you, I just finished up watching The Gentleman on Netflix. And so talking... I
don't think I've seen that.
That it just came out. But it's a completely like British thing. And like you're just freaking me out. Like I totally feel like you and I are going to get involved in a crime together and shoot somebody. So this is fantastic.
Wonderful.
I'm having such a lovely time because I'm having like a whole feeling here. I'm like, oh, I'm basically a Duke. She's going to help me kill some people. It's going to be fantastic. Anyway, people should try The Gentleman on Netflix. Okay, so you have all this stuff happen. Can I ask a question before we get too far down a road?
Yeah.
Why is the bathroom called the loo?
I have no answer for that question.
Seriously?
It just is.
Wait, you really don't know?
I don't know. It just always has been.
Because here, if you ask me why you call the bathroom, I'd say, well, it's the room where you take a bath, right?
Sure.
Can we find out together? I mean, I'm going to look. You just wait for me to look.
Oh, I know. I've listened to enough of the podcast to know how this works.
Yeah, there's got to be some like etymology reason here. Okay, hold on a second. The term loo is commonly British slang for a bathroom or toilet. The origin of the word loo is uncertain. Are you kidding me? But there are several theories. You want to hear the theories?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, not really. But okay, hold on. French influence could be one popular theory is that it comes from the French phrase, wait a minute, lieu d'aisance, which means places of ease or comfort stations. Over time, this phrase might have been shortened to loo. Let's see. Eau de toilette. Another theory suggests that loo might be derived from the French term eau de toilette, literally water or toilet, which refers to lightly scented cologne. The idea is that the toilet water became a euphemism for the bathroom. We're getting there. Gardy-loo. In medieval times, people would empty their chamber pots out the window onto the streets below. Before doing so, they would shout gardy-loo, from the French regards-loo, meaning watch out for the water, as a warning. This could have eventually been shortened to loo. And water closet. There's also a possibility that loo could have come from the term Waterloo, a brand name of early toilets. I love it. I just figured it'd be like some like British thing you'd tell me, but it turns out it's probably a French thing.
Oh, there you go. I would not have guessed that.
I don't want to be too punny, but does it piss you off that it's a French thing and not a British thing?
Not really. I mean, we have some pretty good ones. I grew up in a town called Reading, which is near London, and we have a word for. Now I can't remember the real name. You know, the little bugs that have like armor, like tiny armadillos. We call them cheese logs for some reason. I don't know why.
Oh, wait. Oh, they're like roly-poly bugs or something like that?
Oh, yeah. I think that's,
okay.
That's the same thing. And it's only people in Reading who call them that. It's not even just all of England.
You know, so then when you say getting drunk, do you say getting pissed?
Sometimes.
And do you think that means because you're going to have to go to the bathroom afterwards?
I think maybe.
Oh, my God. All right. I don't want to keep going down these roads with you because you don't seem to know, and I'm just going to wonder all day long. You get diabetes 10 years ago. Sorry about that. That was terrible.
Yeah.
You go to what they call hospital, or do you go to a doctor? How do you handle that whole process?
So it was a doctor, a GP for the original blood tests, and then I went to hospital for the kind of endo appointments, and I've been under care of various hospitals since then.
Do they keep you there? Is it an in and out?
It was just in and out. I was only there for an hour or two the first time, and then I went back a couple of times over the next week, once or twice over the next few months.
Gotcha. Now, in your note to me, you talk a lot about just maybe what doctors could have done differently and like diagnosis issues. And so I'd like to like figure all that out. So first of all, there's a mistake in your diagnosis. How does that happen?
Well, that was the losing the first blood test, and then the second one, you know, they told me what the result of the blood test was, but they didn't tell me that meant I had diabetes.
Okay.
So it took 3 months to get the final diagnosis after I'd figured it out myself.
I see. There's 3 months in there. Jeez. Okay.
Yeah.
How was living for those 3 months? Were you declining?
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah. By the time I went to that last doctor's appointment, I was like, it was a 5-minute walk down the road, and I needed to lie down when I got back.
Jeez.
I was absolutely knackered, like completely useless to anyone.
Feeling like you're dying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for saying knackered,
but it
by
came
the way.
On... You're welcome. It came on so slowly, though, that I was kind of thinking like, oh, I'm just lazy, or I've just gotten into bad habits, or I need to do more exercise and things like that. And you don't realize until you're feeling better how much of a difference it was.
Yeah. That slow kind of blissful drift into death. Seriously. Like your body's just, you're dying slowly, and it's just, you're shutting off so gradually that you can't really tell. Like it's almost better if it hits you all at once so that you're like, hey, something's viciously different than it was yesterday, you know?
Yeah.
No, it sucks. Do you think that what you're talking about here in your note about doctors being too cautious and not telling you things that you think would have helped you, is that from the start, or is it something you ran into later down the road? I want to know about that early time and you're coming to understand what it is you needed to do for yourself.
So I think the what I was told initially was pretty good. I was after, I think the first 2 days they said, give yourself these doses at meals. And then after that, they were like, yeah, once you're comfortable, you can just start carb counting for yourself.
Did they tell you how to do that?
Basically was doing that from the beginning. They told me to pre-bolus. Yeah, they did.
Okay.
So that was fine. And I'm sciencey as well. So I kind of reassured them that was something I'd be able to handle. And yeah, so no problems with that. But within about a week of being diagnosed, I'd started sort of, mentally inventing future solutions for myself. One of which was essentially the Omnipod. I discovered that the Omnipod actually existed. I basically made up something that would do what the Omnipod does.
Were you doing sketches?
And then 10 years later, I found out that the Omnipod existed.
Fran, were you doing sketches? Like, how far did it go exactly?
I may have done a very brief sketch. The general idea was like a thing that you can kind of stick on yourself that has the insulin in it and just sort of sits there. And
well, it was a great idea.
With it.
A fantastic idea.
I know.
Yeah. Did you
it existed already.
Did you not think of Googling it before you started making it up?
You'd think I would have done. I don't know. I mean, I guess I reckon my IQ had taken a significant hit by that point, in my defense.
You think you're a little dopey.
Yeah.
So you're managing with syringes or pens at that point?
Pens.
And you're just thinking like, there's got to be a better way to do this than to be poking myself all these times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? How long did it take you to realize something like that actually existed?
10 years. I found out from the podcast.
Seriously?
About a year and 2 months ago, something like that.
When you heard, were you like, those motherfuckers ripped me off?
Yeah. I think I swore out loud.
Oh my God. I've had this, I feel like I've told this on the podcast before, but I've had this moment where I forget what it was, and the story would have more validity if I could remember. But I used to do this like running little bit with my friends where I was like, I don't know, it was such a good joke. And then one day we were sitting watching Seinfeld in first run, and it was right there. Like they were doing it on the TV show. And I turned to my friend Mike and I was like, if you sold my ideas, I will kill you. It's the first time you realize you're not the only one having a thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's fantastic though. Have you thought of any other things? Like maybe you got a gem in there somewhere.
Quite possibly. I think I did have this idea about hooking up your like fitness tracker, like a Fitbit or something, to like a private instance of some kind of AI, and then stick your Omnipod data in there and Dexcom data and stuff like that, and have it look for patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And presumably, eventually, that will be where it goes. Everyone has their own AI that essentially manages their blood sugar, similar to Omnipod 5, but like smarter and drawing a lot more conclusions about, the patterns of your life. And when you're ill, what does that do to your blood sugar and all those sorts of things.
Do you think it would upset you, Fran, if I told you that tomorrow's episode is with somebody who's talking about something called Vision AI, which is a thing you can actually put your Dexcom data to through your Night Scout, and it will know what your blood sugar is, and you can ask it questions about your blood sugar, and it's also AI based, and it has access to like over 100 episodes of the podcast to help it answer things. You think you'd be like, oh, that's what I meant?
I think I'd be like, excellent.
Oh, okay.
Let's get this going as soon as possible.
Well,
I really don't need to own this.
You don't need to own the idea. Well, it already exists. It's idea brought out by a gentleman named Justin and his wife, and they approached me a number of months ago and asked if I would just help them. At first, they were just looking for like a little bit of advice, kind of back end advice. And then at some point they said, do you think you'd be comfortable if we absorbed some of the podcast into the knowledge of the AI? And I was like, I was already working on that, but it sounds like you're way ahead of me and you have the infrastructure for it that I don't have. So I was like, go ahead and do it. And so it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do believe that you're right about that being really valuable in the future for people. So any other ideas about time travel, perhaps something that hasn't been gotten to yet? Like, feels like you're on what they call the wrong side of the cutting edge. You're having
Sometimes I do.
Go ahead.
I feel like one of those like out of the box type thinker people, like, I have weird ideas and people look at me like that's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, but no, it does actually feel like it's going to be better though. And it just seems like it often takes people a long time to be persuaded by things just because they're new.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty, especially with AI. Like there are going to be a lot of people who are just like, this is not a good idea, or, it's going to, I don't know, blow up the planet or do blah, blah. I don't know what people are going to be concerned about. And I mean, God bless them. I could be wrong, but I feel like very strongly, actually, I feel like this is going to help people with diabetes significantly. The idea of this stuff eventually, like right now, Vision, I think, has like a 24-hour knowledge of your blood sugar. But when they expand that and it suddenly has 3 days or 7 days of your blood sugar knowledge, and you can start asking it, like, do you see any patterns with my lows? Are they coming, after meals, before meals? Like, what do you think is going on? And something that can actually kind of step back, see all that, and just make suggestions to you for you to look at is a big deal. Or how about, I don't know when this will be out. This week I worked on something where I took the episodes of the podcast. There's 3 episodes of the podcast called The Math Behind basal, the math behind insulin sensitivity, the math behind insulin to carb ratio. I forget exactly what they are. I let those episodes be absorbed into, I used ChatGPT 4.0. And then I said, read this transcript and explain to me how the 500 rule works, for example. And it explained it back to me. And I was like, oh my God, that's fascinating. It took that out of the conversation that Jenny and I had. I said to it, do you know the math of this? And it said yes, and showed me the math. And I said, can you turn that into an app that I can embed on my website? And it was like, boom, here's code. I dropped the code into like a non-public page of my website so I could see it. And then sure enough, there it was. I'm like, so then I did it with like how to find your basal insulin. And I was like, there it was. It's an app to figure out where your starting point is for your basal. And I said, well,
that's very cool.
I swear to you, Fran. Then I went back to it and I said, I think this needs a disclaimer. And it like wrote disclaimer language. I read it. And I was like, that disclaimer language looks good. And I said, I think the disclaimer language should be attached to a radial button. And until you agree to it, the app doesn't open on the page. And then it rewrote the code again. And now
that's really cool, because it doesn't always work first time like that.
You got to know how to talk to it. You know what I
mean? Yeah.
And when you stop and really think about it, the math behind figuring out if you have, how your basal insulin should be set up is pretty common. It's common math that every diabetes educator knows, but we don't know it. And as people walking around, and you see people get diagnosed all the time, and their person says, oh, here, this is your starting basal. It almost feels like they're magical. Like, oh, you just knew it's 0.5 an hour. How did you know that? Don't worry about it. But they're just doing this formula. And then you go out and, your 7-year-old gains 40 pounds over the next 5 years. And people are running around going, I don't understand why their blood sugar's high all the time. Well, you could maybe look at your basal insulin again. Like maybe you haven't moved it up enough or whatever. And you could just go back to these things once in a while, plug in your weight. I'm moderately active. This is my age. Where do you think my basal should be about? Boom, there's the answer. Like, geez, you know what I mean? Like, how simple. AI will do that for people all the time. And once you get accustomed to it, imagine going into Vision one day. I'm going to have to bring this up to the owner. But imagine going into Vision one day and saying, go back and look at my blood sugars over an amount of time, and then look at my settings. Here's my current weight. Do you think there's any adjustments to be made here? And it being able to say, oh, I think your insulin sensitivity should change. There's nothing crazy about that. That's very, very doable. So I like your ideas.
Brilliant.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So you do get good knowledge. I mean, because people are telling you to pre-bolus 10 years ago. That's fantastic. They got you off of just start with this, count your own carbs very quickly. Does it keep progressing? Like, how do you end up finding the podcast 10 years later? Like, what's in between that leads you here? For Leah, her husband plays an instrumental role in helping her keep her balloon in the air while managing all of life's ups and downs.
He is my biggest supporter, my biggest cheerleader, my shoulder to cry on.
This episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company who is working to make the invisible visible through their Blue Balloon Challenge.
This person loves me and wants to take care of me and wants to understand what I'm going through and help take on that burden. That's why he's my community. He has helped me continue to live a healthy life with type 1 diabetes and not reach those breaking points.
Sounds like between your husband and Medtronic technology, you're able to keep that balloon in the air longer.
100%. I think it is such a perfect analogy because if you've ever tried to juggle a blue balloon while doing all your other daily tasks and managing diabetes and all that stuff, such a spot on analogy.
As part of this year's Blue Balloon Challenge, Medtronic will be donating to Breakthrough T1D to support their work to achieve affordable access to current therapies, drive adoption of innovative technologies, and fund research for future T1D breakthroughs. Post your video on social media with the hashtag Blue Balloon Challenge and follow at Medtronic Diabetes on Instagram to see other Blue Balloon Challenge videos.
So I got all that information pretty much up front. And then in about 3 months, my A1C went from 13 to 7.7. And then I got no more new information for about 10 years. And my A1C stayed at 7.7 for that whole time. And I guess really I just assumed that there wasn't other information, which looking back on it was obviously a really dumb thing to think. But like, you spend so much energy just keeping going day to day that you don't stop and think maybe there's something bigger here that I haven't been told.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to see it was a little show in a tiny theatre in London somewhere, and it was a guy doing kind of like DJing, but it was also a comedy show, and it was all about diabetes. So he had type 1, and he was, making hilarious musical puns like going low, 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 that kind of thing. And it was just like an hour of that. And he mentioned the podcast. And I was like, oh.
Wait.
So I...
Hold on, Fran, you're blowing my mind here. There's a man in England doing a stage show about diabetes, and he brings up my podcast during it?
I mean, if I remember rightly, I think he might have actually mentioned the podcast, or at the very least, he talked about communities around type 1 and more generally, maybe then I Googled it. I think he might have actually named the podcast.
Oh, that makes me I feel touched by that. Isn't that something?
I know, I thought you'd like that.
No, it made me a little weepy inside. Not like outwardly. I didn't get an actual moisture in my eyes, but I had that feeling in the top of my chest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is lovely. But then I imagined you singing that song again. It killed the feeling completely. Oh, that's so nice. So you were like, I'm fascinated by the idea that like you had a big high number. Somebody gave you some rules. That number went down significantly. And you probably thought that worked.
Pretty much. Yeah. They kept saying, oh, you're doing pretty well. Let's see if we can reduce those spikes at meal times with longer pre-boluses. And I was like, I'm a teacher. I get like 45 minutes for lunch. This is the best I'm going to do. But yeah, that was pretty much all I had for the next 9 or 10 years.
So you think if you don't go see the man sing, you don't go looking around more, and you live a 7.7 A1C existence your whole life?
Quite possibly.
No kidding. How about that? Whether he said Juicebox Podcast or you just heard community and you went and looked. So now when you go find other people talking about it, what's that initial feeling like when you go, oh, wait a minute, am I listening to somebody over here with a 5'5"? This guy's got a 6'2"? Like, how does that strike you?
So I basically listened to the podcast, 4 hours a day for the next 2 weeks or something. I was just I had it on in the background the whole time. And my brain sort of exploded continuously for that entire time. And I had an endo appointment coming up. And this is where the whole story gets really intense again. For context, I'm also autistic, which most of the time is just kind of a quiet little thing in the background. But just sometimes I'll kind of get worried and anxious about something, and then I'll sort of feel very intense about fixing it. And that's what happened here. Okay. So I made myself a great big list of things that I wanted based on the podcast. And then at the beginning of the list, I put the answers to all the questions that my endo asked every time I saw him. because I didn't want to talk about that. I wanted to give him the piece of paper and then talk about the stuff I wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very prepared, feeling good. I went into my appointment. He insisted on asking me all of those questions verbally anyway, despite having a copy of my nice long list in front of him. He talked a lot, very slowly, as he always did. And we got nearly to the end of the appointment before we'd really talked about any of these things I wanted, like Omnipod and Dexcom. I was doing my best to hold in my frustration, but also be as efficient as possible because, he's got like 15 minutes to see me. I want to get this done. And basically all I got was like, oh, I don't know if we can give you a pump, which was frustrating because he'd mentioned pumps to me 3 times before. And then every time it was, oh, we'll talk about it next time. And it's not like I was going, oh, no, I don't want a pump. Every time my answer was, I don't know, it sounds a little invasive, which to me is not negative enough that a doctor should immediately give up, right?
Yeah, but then when you finally came back and showed initiative, now it's not it's off the table now?
Well, he said he just didn't know. He didn't know the answer. He wasn't even telling me no. And I was like, but what? How can you, the endo, like the top of the food chain, not know the answer to this question? So anyway, that was very frustrating. I went home and had, honestly, a pretty significant meltdown on the phone to my parents. But I did manage to get transferred to like a different group of doctors in the hospital. They started, contacting me. One of them was like a dietitian / diabetes nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And I got in contact with him and I started having lots of appointments with him, just sort of trying to figure out the other stuff that was going on, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And eventually I got switched to a new endo. I got approved for the Omnipod DASH and I got the DASH. And then about 3 months after that, the Omnipod 5 came out and I got that almost immediately when it was available in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So I did get what I wanted. Just
going to say, I know the man that went over to the UK to set that up for Omnipod. It's like, it's so funny. Nice. You don't think about it like that, but somebody from here had to go, all right, I'll go live there. And then, went over there, set up an office, got the whole thing together. Takes a lot of time to get something like that happening. It's really interesting to see the end of it where you just get it. It's pretty cool, actually. Did you ever figure out why the doctor slow walked you, or did you just like move on? Like, I'm not going to deal with him anymore. I'll go to somebody else.
Yeah, I mostly just kind of fired him, to be honest. Okay. Like, I tried to do it as gently as possible and not be rude about it or anything. But I just sort of said, like, could I be switched to this other one who I've heard good things about from other patients and who knows lots about pumps and things.
You should have said it very slowly over 15 minutes while you were telling him. So that it was
quite possibly
as frustrating as possible for him.
Yeah.
You live 10 years basically with an A1C in the 7s, injecting with a pen.
Yeah.
And no CGM.
I started funding Freestyle Libre after about a year and a half.
You did that out of pocket?
Yeah, which was not cheap. After a while, I managed to persuade the NHS to start paying for that for me. I think I was still self-funding for a year or two, something like that.
Fran, I don't know how this happens. Like yesterday, I interviewed somebody from India, today, England. I don't know how that happens. Like, because it's not like I put out a call and I'm like, if you don't live in America, I want to talk to you. Like, it's random. But she was telling me yesterday that her Libres, she can only get the Libre 1, and the sensors cost her the equivalent of 1/3 of her rent. And then she started telling me what stuff costs there. And it's, my God, it's as insane as it is anywhere else. And even maybe more so. Really interesting. So you're self-funding a Libre for how long?
I think it was a year or two.
And then you pushed and got, you got Dexcom after that?
No, I stayed on the Libres actually.
Okay.
And after a while switched to Libre 2. And I didn't get the Dexcom until I was getting onto the Dash and preparing for Omnipod 5.
I see. You're moving towards that. How did you like Libre?
It worked well for me.
Yeah. Nothing.
Yeah, particularly once it became pretty much a C. Basically, the scanning was good. It was a huge improvement on the finger pricks, but the CGM functionality was really cool.
Yeah, not having to scan it is a big deal. As far as accuracy, do you see a difference between Libre and Dexcom?
I think maybe the Dexcom is a tiny little bit more delayed, but nothing major.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I actually wore both together for a little while at the beginning, just because I wondered. And yeah, it seemed to be pretty similar.
Gotcha. And you're wearing a G6 now, obviously, because you're wearing Omnipod 5.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you like having the algorithm?
Oh, I love it. So this is the second half of this year's story where this becomes really interesting. Is about a month after that really frustrating endo appointment, I started having lows at night, and like a lot of lows at night.
Mm-hmm.
Every single night I was having multiple lows, and they were very persistent. And then it was going high in the morning. And I don't think it was the hypo treatments, because I tried starting myself high in the evening, and then I watched it go down, but not quite hypo, so I didn't need to treat, and then came back up again. And there was this huge drop, like really quite a large drop, and then it was going back up again. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
This dietitian, who was great, he's really good at talking you through like dosing and stuff. We fiddled with stuff. We changed my basals. I was already splitting the dose, so we fiddled that around. Nothing was working. The only thing that fixed it after a good 3 months of multiple hypos a night was the DASH. And I did that by, they get you on the DASH and they're like, so you probably go with a fairly flat basal rate all day. And I was like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm going to go for 0.8 an hour during the day. And at night, we're doing 0.15 in the middle of the night, and it kind of ramps up and down either end of that. And immediately, perfectly flat blood sugar all night.
Yeah.
So not only do I have this weird basal profile, but also it completely changed overnight.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, right? Like you were doing fine, and then all of a sudden, is there any hindsight that helps you there? Do you have any changes in like, oh God, I'm sorry, menstruation stuff? I don't know, like why did I think I was never gonna have to talk about this if I had a podcast? But like stress, big life change, nothing that you can kind of look back on and go, something shifted?
I'm autistic, Scott. I've been stressed since I was about 6.
Gotcha.
But no, nothing. The only thing that changed, well, okay, admittedly, I was more stressed because my expectations around my blood sugar had changed very suddenly. Mm-hmm. There was a bit of extra stress there, but that was by no means the first time that had happened.
Right. You didn't start exercising? Did you start using cocaine? Nothing. Like nothing big, right? It just was like nothing. How about that?
No. Just my expectations around diabetes changed, and my diabetes changed at the same time.
How about that? I'll be damned.
Yeah.
Well, and
the doctors are not interested in this. They don't want to look into why that might have been or anything like that.
Oh no, you tell them about the lows. They just talk about like shutting off. Like, did they talk? What did they do? Anything? They just tell you to treat it? Did they tell you to eat a snack? Like, what kind of banal bullshit did they give you?
While I was on pens, it was treat it. Consider running yourself higher at the start of the night. And to be honest, pens can't fix this. Mm-hmm. So I was like, good. So I'll be on the DASH really soon then. And they were like, well, but I got funding relatively quickly compared to most people, I think, because I was just really pushy about it.
Before the pump, you were shooting basal insulin once a day. What kind of insulin was it?
Twice a day, and it was Levemir.
Levemir. And you were always getting low at the same time overnight. Did you try moving the Levemir around?
Oh, yeah.
It didn't work.
Yeah. I drew diagrams. There was a whole scientific investigation going on. And at the end of that, the dietitian guy was like, this just can't be done.
I wonder if everyone listening isn't imagining like I am, like that you have a diary somewhere with like every amazing thing that's ever been invented and you've got it sketched out, but the date is always 3 years after it was invented. And then in there also is your Levemir diagram and everything else. Scott, I think we can take oil out of the ground and turn it into gasoline and run engines with it. I've been having some big thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I love the diagram idea about the Levemir though. But I know what you mean, like because you've already learned to split. How did you learn to split Levemir, by the way?
I think it was suggested by one of my doctors, to be fair, just to get it a bit smoother. Mm-hmm. I think I was on Lantus before that, and that was once a day.
Yeah, I mean, splitting Levemir is like a classic use of it, but I just didn't know. Like, it's interesting. You do get decent information from your doctors, more so than a lot of people, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then they fall short in other places sometimes. I guess this is what it is, though. You know, you do really have to chase down the ones that can help you.
And like, to be fair to them, it's only recent that really you could actually reasonably get hold of Omnipod on the NHS.
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah, you live in a country that's like the size of Jersey. Ahead. What's that?
You guys are just really far ahead of us.
Yeah. I mean, we have a whole, like, I don't know if you've noticed, we're a superpower. Tons of land, money, missiles. We could pretty much do whatever we want. You're living over there on a patch of dirt. Like it's like as big as like one of our highways. You know what I mean? Like it's just.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Don't make us send Texas after you.
Here,
wait, what?
We do have cars here.
Oh, I know, but you put the steering wheels on the wrong side.
That's true. Yeah.
How'd you mess that up?
Maybe we just like to be different.
Fran, I got to tell you something. There's a whole thing to be made there. Like how does that? Like, why does that matter? Like, why does some people drive on one side of the road and some people drive on the other side of the road? Why is that not a universal thing?
Organizational issues, I guess.
Yeah, it's just interesting, isn't it?
Two people were like, we need to be able to drive. I mean, when we had carts, there was you could sit on either side of the cart, right?
Yeah.
And then somebody invented cars. And somebody over on the other side of the pond was like, hey, that's a great idea. I'll build one like that, but wasn't looking closely enough. So I don't know. They just had to pick one side or the other, I guess.
You got any diagrams of cars in that book of yours over there? 1970,
no, I don't think so.
Drawn in 1995. And it says, I think we could revolutionize this horse thing.
I refuse to drive a car. They're terrifying.
Really? For you don't like?
Yeah. I mean, I passed my test first time. Because my parents told me that if I passed, I wouldn't have to drive again.
What a parenting move. I love driving. I don't drive enough. I feel like there are days when I'll like in the middle of the day, like, I don't know if one of the things you might want to learn about being a podcaster is that I can kind of make my own schedule to some degree. And there'll be times that I'm just sitting here working and I'll stand up and I'll be like, I'm going out. And I sometimes don't believe that the place I'm going is important. I just get in my car, I put the windows down, I put on some pretty obnoxious music, and I drive for a little bit. And at some point, I enjoy driving a little faster to let out my adrenaline. But none of this is appealing to you.
Oh, no, that's crazy.
It seems crazy.
That's fine.
Oh, my God.
I mean, I have to say, like, I live in a world of privilege because London has good public transport. So I don't need to drive.
Well, yeah. I mean, you are in a city, so
yeah.
I take your point. Like, but I've like a couple of months from now, Arden will go back to college, and I'm going to go down there to help her get set up in a new place, and I'm looking forward to like driving 700 miles like by myself for a full day, like just getting in a car and just none of that sounds attractive to you at all.
Not in the slightest.
Okay, no problem. Can I ask about this because I always feel like people hear this from adults and say, where did this come from? So like you're 33, you feel like you've been, you've known you've had autism your whole life. Like how has that impacted you as a child and how does it work as an adult? How do you get diagnosed and why do you, in my opinion, like just from talking to you for 45 minutes now, like if that's not a thing you would have told me, that is not a thing I would have guessed about you. So can you walk me through all that?
I actually got diagnosed at the age of 28.
Okay.
I don't know. So when I was a kid, I had like a lot of anxiety and a lot of meltdowns. Academically, I was ahead, but some of the kind of social stuff was a lot. Aeroplanes used to cause major meltdowns. I didn't really like the cinema because it was too loud, apparently. Those sort of situations were just fraught with anxiety, things like that. I don't know. Nobody ever really thought to find out, I guess. But then I'd sort of suspected as I grew up, and then I met somebody who he's autistic, and we chatted for a bit, and he just kind of asked me like, had you guessed that I was autistic? And I was like, I think you've mentioned it, in fact. And then I said, well, I think it's possible that I'm also autistic. And he went, yeah, you are. I was like, oh, okay. So then I got diagnosed, and it explained a lot.
No kidding. And did it help you getting the diagnosis? Like, how did it How did it comfort you or help you?
There's a kind of description that I think fits quite well. It's really comforting to know that you're a normal zebra, not a broken horse.
Okay. Say zebra one more time for me.
And now
please.
I kind of have a word.
Please. Yeah, thank
zebra.
you. I appreciate that. But it's not like, I mean, it's not like you have a job, right? And you taught kids. I mean, not well, it sounds like at the end, but, and so you
I was doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Even when you couldn't hear them.
Hey, they don't necessarily need to be talking in order for them to be doing maths. Not all the time. The mute button was a toggle thing, you turn them on and off when you need them.
The mute button might be the name of your episode, by the way. So,
Interesting.
So there's a comfort level to it. Like, is there just because, there's this kind of like, I mean, it's hard not to have this feeling that like nowadays, like in the last handful of years, everyone feels like they want to be diagnosed with something. I don't even mean like autism. Like people really want to be labeled. Isn't it funny like how things change? Like, when I was growing up, it was like, I'm different. Don't label me. Don't lump me in with those people. Like that's how everyone thought. And now they're like, tell me what's happening to me. What's wrong with me? What category do I fit in? It's interesting how people's like minds shift. So like that helps you though, to know where you fit.
I mean, I think there's two aspects of it, right? The first one being that society and people in general are a lot better at looking at a label and not necessarily assuming that everyone that uses that label is the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other one is just, I think, okay, if I said, Scott, what's your job? And you weren't allowed to use the word podcaster,
right? You'd
have to go, well, I do this thing where I sit in my chair and I talk to somebody, but they're not really there. They're somewhere else. And we talk about this stuff. And then I put it somewhere where other people can hear it later. And you have to do that every time, and explaining yourself becomes difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that being understood is difficult. And particularly when you're autistic, that's been a problem your whole life anyway. And it's very frustrating and it makes it harder to connect with people, I think.
What a great explanation. It's fantastic. Thank you. That very clarified it for me.
Okay.
Did you have that written in your book or did you come up with that off the top of your head?
I guess off the top of my head, but
very
with
nice.
the benefit of having thought about it before.
Yeah, no, it's not your first time putting it into words.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate that because I'm trying to understand that. Like, it just feels like everybody wants to be something. And I don't know if that's me being old, you know what I mean? And like, but it does feel like that to me. Like everybody's like, I want to do this, or like, tell me I fit here. Or like, I'm like, just go be yourself. But your explanation is really clarifying. If you were 25 in 1980, how do you think people would have described you?
People already described me as weird. I described myself as weird. I decided to reclaim that word very early in my life.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think they just think I'm slightly weird. You heard of Uncanny Valley?
Mm-hmm.
I think people get that with me when they don't know me very well.
Okay.
I think it gets in the way when I'm auditioning for musicals as well.
You do the singing and the dancing?
I do a lot of the singing and the dancing just for funsies. It's not a professional thing or anything, but yeah.
Oh, it's lovely. How do you do that? Is that a group of like a group that you have? Do you belong to a club? I don't know what to call it, but like, how does that happen?
Yeah, it's essentially it's an Amdram society, amateur dramatics. Yeah, just kind of a thing we do in the evenings.
Is this because you don't like Dungeons and Dragons?
I do like Dungeons and Dragons. I do that the weekends.
I was just kidding. I knew you did. I was just checking. So I'm oddly good at picking out people's things. It's possible if someone said, Scott, what do you do for a living? I'd say, I generalize, but I'm really accurate about it.
Well, to be fair, Scott, you don't get that many points for figuring out that I'm a raging nerd. It's kind of obvious.
Fine. But the people who were surprised just now, like, how did he know that? Let them be surprised by it, okay? To them, I look like a soothsayer to them, so let that be.
Yeah.
The last line of your note to me, I don't understand. Shameless bribery in the form of a limerick.
Yeah. So I have a poem.
Wait, you have a poem that you want to share with me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Because, I didn't know how difficult it was going to be to get onto this podcast, and I wanted it to be successful, so I thought I'd use bribery.
I was just like, I don't know what this means, but I do know what a limerick is. And it doesn't start with there once was a girl in Nantucket, does it? Because I don't want to hear that one.
It doesn't.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
All right, here we go. There once was a guy named Scott. We think he's smart. He says not. If your blood sugar's high and you want to know why, he says, don't overthink, take a shot.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. How quickly is that in your book? That's got to be in your book, right?
It's on a Google Doc.
Okay, Google. Your diary is a Google Doc. That's fantastic. How long does it take to come up with that?
Oh, like 2 or 3 minutes.
Nice. See? I could never do that, I don't think.
Huh.
There's something, I like the sing-song. There's like a beautiful sing-songy thing to it. I'm very nice. Oh, thank you. I'm touched. Thank you.
Well, you don't like a proper compliment too often, do you?
No, I know. It does work better this way. I'm learning right now, actually, as you're doing it, because I can ignore the part where you said I was smart and just go to the funny part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good for me. Do you think I'm smart?
Yeah. I mean, like, Scott, you got my A1C from 7.7 to like 5.6 in 6 months.
I got your A1C from 7.7 to 5.6 in 6 months. Don't leave out the part where I did it over the internet. I don't know you and I never spoke to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty much a genius, but I don't want it to be said out loud because I think it ruins my everyman quality.
That's fair.
Oh, okay. Let me share something with you. I hope this is funny for people. I was texting with a friend yesterday and she paid me a compliment about the podcast. And hold on, I want to find it for you. Okay, she said, you have Scott Benner. I don't think you realize how unique you are. So she was talking about like diabetes organizations and how I appear to be outpacing them significantly on doing the thing that they say they're doing, which is helping people. She says, you have this advantage that they don't have. You have you. And she says at the end, I don't think you realize that. And I said, hold on a second. I'm sorry. And then I lost my place. I said, you're very nice, but trust me, I know. It's just distasteful to say out loud. Well, I appreciate that you know as well. I don't think I would have to tell you that in most walks of life, I'm a fairly average person. I do think that I'm good at building a narrative. Like, so there's this thing that's happening if you're listening to the podcast that you don't know is happening. So Monday's show and Tuesday's show don't seem connected, and they're not. And so I don't run themes that are obvious when you look at a micro snapshot of the podcast. But if you stick with the podcast and you keep listening, there's a macro idea that covers the whole thing. And if you stay in it long enough, like you did, you power listened for hours and hours and hours for months. Like, so you basically just got your 10,000 hours of the podcast real quickly. There is a theme that is spread out so widely that you almost can't see how it ties together. It just kind of magically ties together as you're listening. And I will tell you, and I will take full credit for this, I am doing that on purpose.
I fully believe that.
Yeah, but I don't know how I'm doing it. And that you have to believe too. Like there are people in my life, Isabel's one of them. She'll remind me once in a while what I'm doing because she's like, I don't think you know. And I do think that's true. Like to some degree, like I just get up every day, do the thing I do. I don't have notes. Nothing's written down. I've never planned anything. All I have is a whiteboard with words like scribbled all over it. And I look at that board sometimes while I'm recording, sometimes while I'm working. And then I go, okay, that part's next. And then I move in that direction. But you guys don't see it because I'm not like a person who's like, this week we're going to talk about this. You know what I mean? Or this episode is about this thought. I would much rather have a conversation like the one I just had with you, which I think is entertaining and interesting, and then let the takeaways be what they are for whoever can take whatever is in this one. And if I went back, I could thoughtfully hammer apart our conversation and tell you where the lessons are in it, but I don't even care. Like people will take them out or they won't, or they'll get the same lesson out of a different conversation later. I don't like with a mallet, like teaching. Do you know what I mean? Like, I like it being there. You'll absorb it. If you want it, it's yours. When you realize it, that seems like the best time to me to make a change. Like, it's not going to help if I sit down and tell you, hey, you probably shouldn't eat cupcakes every day. If I said that, people would think I was a bore and terrible and they wouldn't listen. But if you listen to this podcast, there is an underlying message in it somewhere that you should eat better. But I've never once said it out loud. And that's kind of how I think about this whole thing. But also to say that I think about it consciously is not accurate. And so I don't really know how to explain it. And so often I don't even know what it is I'm doing. I'm just doing it. And then once in a while, Isabel reminds me, or my friend texts me or something and tells me, I can't believe what you accomplished this week. And, you know, on Tuesday's show. And by the way, while they're saying that, I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. So it's a really weird position to be in, to not be able to explain yourself completely. But I guess maybe here we are. So I appreciate that you liked it and that it helped you. It's that means a lot to me.
Yeah, it really did.
Good. Well, I'm glad.
And it will continue helping.
I hope so.
And now I'm going to have to listen to tomorrow's episode immediately.
Yes, to find out about Vision AI. And I would love to tell you I'm being sincere about this. I would love to tell you what's on my whiteboard.
I was going to ask.
People will rip me off if I say it on the podcast, so I can't do it. I learned that years ago, where I'd say something and then I'd wake up and someone else would be doing it on a website or a podcast. And I'd be like, well, that's a very unique idea. Where'd they get that idea from? And if you hear me mention it on the podcast, it's because I already have it recorded. And I know
maybe that's where I'm going wrong. Maybe all my ideas are just getting stolen. And that's why I'm having them too late.
Fucking Henry Ford. My God. I love that you dreamt up I really do love that you dreamt up the insulin pump.
Yeah. Should have looked into it in more detail earlier. But
definitely could have Googled it. It would have been quicker.
Yeah.
Is there a device that helps you put insulin in without a needle? And you would have been like, oh my God, there it is. Is that the autism?
I don't know. I feel like it's so intertangled with my personality in general that it's quite hard to know what's autism and what's just like something that I'm quite good at or something that I'm not very good at or what, really.
Yeah. Because you were like, this is a good idea. You believed in yourself and you kind of went down the rabbit hole with it. I must have no self-esteem, which people are probably laughing about now after I just said a bunch of nice stuff about myself. But because if I had that thought, I would immediately think if I thought it, then somebody else has already thought it. It's interesting. I doubt myself constantly like that.
I guess I probably did think that. And then because I hadn't heard about it from the doctors, maybe I just kind of assumed that it couldn't be done yet, or that it had been tried and didn't work very well, or something like that. I guess I didn't really think about it in that much detail.
No, I think it's fascinating. I really do find that whole aspect of the conversation fascinating, because I would have been like, oh, if you thought of it, somebody else has already thought of it before. I definitely had that problem growing up. Like, if I was good at something, I just assumed everybody must be good at it, because there'd be no way I'd be good at something that somebody else wasn't. But that might be from being brought up poorly. Did you have good parents?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they handled all the autism stuff really well, especially considering that they weren't given any actual advice about it.
Yeah.
They did make me go on airplanes quite a lot, but they put up with the constant, 12 hours of crying very well. And my mum's catchphrase was "normal is boring," which has probably become like a foundational part of my psyche. And it's kind of how I went through life not feeling kind of crap about myself, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, you seem to have an incredibly cheery outlook. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, I think so.
I mean, you come off that way. So, yeah, like I haven't heard one part of I have diabetes or this or that, and it's holding me down, or I'm upset. Like, you have anxiety, but the anxiety seems generalized, not about specifically about your diabetes or about anything else. And you don't, I haven't heard you lament anything at all.
Well, if I was going to lament something, it would be the fact that I am tired all the time. And that has been true pretty much my whole life. And I haven't been able to figure out why.
Did you have your thyroid checked?
Yeah. It's been in range, even mostly within what you would call range.
Right.
But weirdly, it's changed a lot within that range over the last 4 years.
How?
So it was 0.8, 0.9, 2.5, and then 1.3. I don't know if that's normal for it to jump around like that.
Have they ever imaged your thyroid to see if you have nodules or anything like that, or done antibody testing?
They haven't imaged my thyroid. I think they did antibody testing for type 1, but
not for the thyroid.
Nothing for thyroid.
Well, listen, that's a road to look down. What about do you have very heavy periods? Could you have low iron?
I don't have any, actually. The pill I'm on just makes them not happen, which is glorious.
No kidding. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I'm taking a pill, basically a shot that made me thin, and that's fantastic too.
I was tempted by that too.
Oh, it's lovely. Wait do you see, if you do it, wait do you see what that does to your insulin needs? Seriously.
Well, they won't let me have it. My BMI is not anywhere near high enough. I'm just frustrated that I've got like a lot of fat on my stomach, which never existed before diabetes. And then recently I was told that it was all like lipohypertrophy and that exercise and dieting wouldn't make it go away. So that's the thing.
Do you want to tell me your BMI? And does it change in?
It's like 22 or something, I think. It's like almost perfectly on the normal, slightly above maybe.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, do you think you have insulin resistance issues or no?
So I definitely do think I did. For most of that 10 years where I was on pens, it felt like there was no amount of pre-bolus that was enough, because it wasn't so much about the speed that the insulin started happening. It was more that the peak was too wide for the food. Mm-hmm. So the food would dissolve incredibly quickly in a really sort of narrow peak. The insulin would be a really wide peak. So I'd get a spike in blood sugar, whatever I did. And sometime around about when I got onto the DASH, I started asking about metformin. And I managed to persuade the NHS to give me metformin because I was borderline for PCOS. So I didn't have, like, the ultrasound was negative, the blood test was sort of kind of borderline, and symptoms wise, I managed to persuade them that was a potential positive. So I said, you know what, why don't we try metformin? Because that's what one does for PCOS. And hey, maybe it'll help with the diabetes. And now, because it's clearly helping with the diabetes, they're letting me keep it.
Did it help with the PCOS?
No particular difference as far as I can tell. And as I say, it's only borderline as to whether I even have that. It was just a good way of persuading them to let me try the metformin.
Yeah. Well, at the moment in America, they're not allowing GLPs for anything more than they allow them for. But I mean, we got Arden 1 for insulin resistance. It's working astonishingly well. We are adjusting her dose right now because she lost more weight than, anybody would have liked or guessed. We're trying to find an adjustment spot where the GLP is impacting her blood sugars positively, but allowing her to eat a little more. And we also don't know if she can't eat or if she just got to that point where she was in college. The biggest problem is that we started her on a GLP right before she left for school. And so she was gone for 6 months and we couldn't really see her. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, my clothes don't fit the same. And we're like, looking at her on FaceTime. We're like, yeah, it looks like you're losing weight and everything. But she lost more than we wanted her to. Like, we didn't want her to lose any. And she lost more than we would have wanted her to, I guess is what I should say. But her blood sugars are like legit. You know what I mean? Like, fantastic. And like her high excursions are near, nothingness. There's no lows that are like frequent, nothing you could point to. So it's all really wonderful. She's using much less insulin. PCOS symptoms are really being like impacted nicely. There's no, at this moment, scientific study that says that GLPs work on PCOS symptoms. Like, so you can't just walk into a doctor and say, hey, I have PCOS and I hear GLPs really might help with that. Can I give it a shot? And they're going to say, well, it's not covered for that. And most doctors wouldn't even write you a prescription for it for that.
Yeah.
But if you had type 1, then you could probably see the insulin resistance and then you can kind of couple them together. But still, insurance here doesn't cover GLPs for insulin resistance unless you have type 2 right now. But I think studies are coming. As a matter of fact, I know of one. I think we'll get to it, but it's probably going to take a bit of time.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
And I guess the thing is, like, the only place I want to lose any fat is on my stomach. The rest of me, I'm like, yeah, that'll do. That's fine. And I feel like that's not really what they're for. They're more of a kind of general fat loss, weight loss kind of thing. And if diet and exercise doesn't get rid of lipohypertrophy, then it feels like GLP wouldn't either, because it would be the same mechanism, but just more efficient, I guess.
I mean, in a magical world where, you can get whatever your doctor gives you and it's not about insurance or coverage or anything like that, I would think for you, if it was valuable, and I don't know that it would be, if it was valuable, it would be more about insulin resistance and PCOS symptoms is where you'd want the value.
Yeah.
And then if you lost some belly fat, then good. You know what I mean? It can't make you lose more weight than you have. That's one way to look at it. But you also don't want to be super in shape and your ass, your legs, your arms, and your belly is just like round.
Well, now let's be fair. Super in shape is not a phrase that I would use for myself. But mostly just because I'm not a big fan of the exercise. But
why don't you add some sit-ups into your dancing?
Helping.
Add some sit-ups into your dancing.
Yeah, you'd think that would be easy.
No. Like it was so artistic, but in the middle, she started doing aerobics. It's very strange. Fran, have we not said anything that we should have? Have we missed anything?
I guess I was going to ask you about AAPS, because with Omnipod 5, it feels like it's sort of broadly thinking of flattish basal profile is the starting point, right? Because all it does is look at your daily insulin and kind of like spread some out over the day. And because my basal profile seems to be so weird, it feels like its default is probably a bit too much insulin at night and not enough during the day. Whereas it feels like if it was sort of looking at my basal profile and saying, okay, I already know she needs less at night and more in the day, then it would be more able to remove some insulin to prevent a hypo at night, and it just might be a bit more effective. And I'm wondering if Android APS would be worth looking into for something like that.
Well, I mean, you're going to have more IAPS, but you're going to have, in any of the DIYs, whether it's Loop or that, you're going to have more ability to make changes. Like, so you can go into Loop as an example or IAPS and set your basal much lower overnight, the expectations for what you need. You can change your insulin sensitivity, hour by hour if you want to, those kinds of things. And so you could make impacts there that I think were more fine tuned than you could with a retail system. But I mean, to say that Arden's never had a low overnight isn't true either. You know what I mean? Like, so, like we had dinner last night. Arden went out. Her blood sugar was like legitimately fantastic. And then around like 1 a.m., is that when it was? I'm looking right now. Yeah, she was riding like 10 o'clock last night, 97, 83, 85, 75. Then all of a sudden, like it just dropped into like the 60, and she had to adjust. She had to give herself insulin, or excuse me, carbs. And like that was fine. And then this morning, while sleeping at 6:30 a.m., her blood sugar got into the mid 60s for a half a second, but the algorithm pulled it out. Not a lot of lows, but they still happen. And they're not like, I shouldn't say never, but generally speaking, they're not tumbling, crashing. Oh my God, we have to stop this with 4 juice boxes and, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're going to get low on everything, I think, at some point. I don't think that's, completely avoidable. But, any of the algorithms that you can do it yourself are going to be much more user friendly as far as adjustments go. You just have to decide how much you want to be involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is always going to be a question. Because I guess the other thing is you can set like profiles on the DIYs, right? So I could be like, this is my profile for when I'm ill. And then if I'm getting a cold, I can switch to that. It'll be more aggressive, but then I can switch back when I'm feeling better. Whereas with Omnipod, it's got to slowly figure out that I'm ill, adjust for that, and then figure out that I'm not ill anymore and adjust for that. So you get the highs at the start of being ill, but you get the lows at the start of being healthy again. And just being able to give it that extra bit of information might just sort of help it adjust more quickly, I guess.
I think that's a completely valid, I don't know if it's a criticism, but it's a completely valid criticism of Omnipod 5. So that it's not adjusting. I mean, nothing adjusts on a dime, but that, to your point, that other stuff, you can go in and say, hey, not so much today. You know what I mean? Like we did it, like Arden's home, just from school for the last couple of days. And her first or second night, I said to her, like, you knock your algorithm back, like by like, so basically we have like settings. I have a 90 and an 80 like preset in her IAPS. It basically just turns everything down to 80% or everything down to 90% just by a push of a button. And I realized that she's going to get home after all the like stress and anxiety and rushing around at the end of her, like her finals and all these overnights she was pulling and probably not eating well and etc. And so as soon as she got home and she relaxed, I was pretty sure she was going to get low. So like night one, I was like, put that thing to 80 before you go to bed. And we've used 80 overnight a couple of times, then 90. And now we're getting back to 100% again. Like, because the algorithm is going to, the way I have IAPS set up, it's using the dynamic settings. So all the settings, basal, insulin to carb ratio, insulin sensitivity, it is dynamically changing them as her needs change. So I basically said, like, look, I think you have less need coming up over these next couple nights. Let's tell it 80%, 80%, 90%. Let it see that, and then go ahead back and tell it, go back to 100% now, and then it kind of makes the adjustments smoother. And that's how I've been using it for that. And that is not something you're going to do on Omnipod 5.
That sounds pretty tempting.
Yeah.
Might have to start doing objectives in the background.
Well, I think after you get your Google Doc all filled up with your notes on it, you'll figure out if you want to do it or not. And then, from there, you're building apps. You're also fall into other situations, which is, and I don't know enough about this to speak completely with a lot of clarion statements, I guess. But, it is a do-it-yourself thing, which means that there's some people online who are working on it. And let me be a little obtuse. Those people don't always get along with each other. And sometimes some of them do things that aren't great and, make changes to algorithms and don't go through the testing like they should and just throw them out into the world. And sometimes people overtest things and anywhere in between. And, then you see a branch break off because these people didn't get along with that person. And like, that's a thing that's happening. Like, Omnipod is never going to be like, here's 6 different versions of Omnipod 5 based on the feelings of 6 different people who work in the office. And so like, there is stability with that is attractive. You know what I mean? So I don't know. There's a lot to think about, in my opinion.
Oh, also, while I've got you, if you could just let Omnipod know that being on automated mode, but still being able to do extended boluses would be incredibly helpful. That would be just lovely.
I think you just let them know.
Because I have to split. No, that's fair. But I have to split almost all my boluses now, which is definitely better, right? Because there is now something I can do that makes the peaks match up a bit better. But it means that I have to do a lot of thinking and remembering and coming back to it later and stuff like that. So
being able to split a bolus in Omnipod 5 would be a big deal for you.
Yeah, split and or extend, I guess.
Yeah. It is it's not weird that they removed it, but I see what they're going for, if that makes sense. Like I definitely get what they're going for. They want a thing that you don't have to think about. Like that you're not very involved in. And I think that for a great many people, I think that's fantastic. But for you, who you wants to make an adjustment, it leaves it a little short for you. Yeah, because it means now that I basically, for most meals, I can't put all the insulin up front because I'll have a low while I'm eating. Yeah. No, I understand. I understand why. Which actually is more thinking than if they just let me do an extended bolus. Just let me do it myself. All right. Well, you heard her, Omnipod. For the love of God, let them have extended boluses in automated mode. Yay. There, I took care of it for you. I've said this a couple of times in the last couple of days because people keep asking me for things. I'm like, I am not nearly as powerful as you think I am, but I certainly will mention it to somebody. You know more people from Omnipod than I do, so I'm counting that as a win. They are lovely people too, actually. 100% true. Okay. Well, thank you very much for doing this with me. I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Would you hold on 1 second for me?
Sure.
Thanks. Today we heard from Leah, who will be participating in her own Blue Balloon Challenge. Follow at Medtronic Diabetes on Instagram and use the hashtag Blue Balloon Challenge on social to see inspiring videos from Leah, Aaron, and other people living with diabetes. And you can join the challenge yourself or with your support squad to show how you're keeping your balloon in the air on top of everything else in life. A huge thanks to a longtime sponsor, Eversense 365. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. 1 year, 1 CGM. Eversense 365. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, and you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. Hey, you listened all the way to the end. You might want to know more about the Juicebox Podcast. If you do, go to juiceboxpodcast.com, scroll down to the bottom, and subscribe to the Juicebox Podcast newsletter. Each week, you'll get a rundown of the shows from the past week, just in case you missed something and you think, oh, I would have loved that. Now I know. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Hey, what's up, everybody? If you've noticed that the podcast sounds better and you're thinking, like, how does that happen? What you're hearing is Rob at Wrong Way Recording doing his magic to these files. So if you want him to do his magic to you, wrongwayrecording.com. You got a podcast? You want somebody to edit it? You want Rob.